Welcome back, guys, to another episode of Spearfishing Support, the podcast where we answer your guys' questions, interview people, and just generally talk spearfishing. Today, we're going to answer questions like how much weight we should be using, talk about GoPro settings, and we're going to show you the knot that I use to connect my shooting line to my reel line. That and more on today's episode. Let's start first with weighting. This is a question that came in on YouTube on the last Spearfishing Support podcast that I did. BRBA says, I understand weights on a belt is different for everyone and different for each diving situation. But for pros like you and Justin, how thick are your wetsuits? And on average, how much weight are on your belts? What factors are considered to reduce or increase the weights on your belts? Now, weighting is something that is super important for spearfishing. It is not just a super important free diving technique to keep us safe and make us efficiently dive, but it's also really important to our spearfishing because the better we're weighted we are, the more neutral we are throughout our hunting experience. So the less work we have to do, but also the more we're going to blend into something like a turtle or a seal or a dolphin. Think about when you see a video or you see a turtle swimming around, how it just kind of seems to hover and effortlessly does its little moves and cruises along. Dolphins, seals, all do that same thing. And that's because they control their buoyancy with their lungs and they make themselves neutrally buoyant where they want to hunt. Now for us, we cannot blow out air and bring in more air for our diving because we need all the oxygen that we can have available in our lungs, but we can still weight ourselves according to the depth that we're going to be hunting at. So for 99% of us, we're hunting deeper than 33 feet, which means that we like to be neutral right around that 33 feet depth range. What that does is that allows us to float effortlessly on the surface, breathe up nice and easy, relaxed, dive down, push through that positive buoyancy phase where we have to fight our own buoyancy, push through that, and then sink negatively after that. And then when we get down to the bottom, 60, 70, 80, 50, whatever we're hunting at, we're going to be held to the bottom with our buoyancy and effortlessly kind of blend in with the bottom and be sneaky. However, we're not glued to the bottom. If we need to move, you'll see in a lot of our videos, I just take that left hand, I go, and I move myself, and I'm effortlessly gliding across the bottom, getting closer, creeping up on my fish. And we do that by weighting properly. And there's a couple factors that factor into kind of how much weight we're using. Basically, we're all semi-neutral, our body composition. The fatter you are, more you're going to float, more muscle you are, more you're going to sink. But we're all kind of neutral. What happens is we put a wetsuit on that actually makes us even more buoyant. So we need to generally think about our weighting as offsetting the buoyancy from our wetsuit. So when I'm out here spearfishing in an old 3 mil, I might be wearing 6 pounds. But when I'm in California diving with a 7 mil, I might be using 20 pounds. My body didn't change. My depth generally stayed the same. But what changed was the thickness of my wetsuit. So because of that, we always want to dive with the least amount of neoprene as possible. So the thinnest wetsuit that I can possibly get away with is what I always want to be diving with. I don't want to be cold, but I don't want to wear 10 pounds if I don't have to wear 10 pounds. Because as you do dive and your lungs compress and your wetsuit compresses, your lead doesn't compress. So the more lead you have on, the harder it is to leave the bottom and push back up through that positive buoyancy fighting against you now to get up back to the surface. So the couple factors, your personal body composition, the thickness of the wetsuit that you're using, and the depth that you're diving. Because the deeper that we actually go, the more we want to pull that neutral buoyancy point down. So if I'm diving 130 feet, I don't necessarily want to be neutral at 33. Instead, I might pull that down to 45 feet. And that gives me a whole lot more window where I'm not super negative and I'm not super positive. So it's more effortless to travel through that zone versus if I were to be weighting the same, diving 50 feet, and now I'm neutral at 33. When I leave the bottom at 130 feet, I'm extremely negative. I have to push through a lot of negative buoyancy to get back up into that sweet spot. So unfortunately, weighting is going to be different for everybody and even every situation. When I'm kind of, if I haven't been diving in a long time and I've gained some weight, I can feel it on my buoyancy. I might not feel it in like my fitness or anything else, but I can feel it in my buoyancy, and I might have to add a pound. The other thing that's constantly changing is the dimensions of your wetsuit. So a new wetsuit is significantly more buoyant than the same wetsuit after, say, 6 months or a year of use, because they do compress and all those air bubbles get smaller and it becomes less buoyant. So because of all those things, we have to weight ourselves every time, and not necessarily change our weight every single time we go diving, but be aware of it and have the option to add a pound, take off a pound. And the way we do that is we check that neutral buoyancy point. We swim down to 33 feet, we check, we see, are we floating, are we sinking? Best way to do that, swim down, stare at your watch, do not move. Usually you're either floating or you're sinking or you're feeling just right. And for 99% of people, that is the game right there. 33 feet, check your buoyancy, and then add or subtract. Small weights are going to help you significantly to make those minor adjustments. I know that is a complicated question for everybody, but the only real way to answer it is it varies for everybody, and you got to go out there and you got to just try and experiment and figure out how to adjust your own weight belt for 33 feet on that particular day, because it changes. Okay, next question. So from Daniel Arachiga, we've got, hi Ryan, could you possibly demonstrate how you grunt, best times to grunt, length, and volume? I'm never sure if my grunts are loud enough, not loud enough, too aggressive, and if I should be looking at fish while doing so. Mahalo. So the grunting thing, and this is kind of a pet peeve of mine personally, because I feel like I showed the world on YouTube that we grunt a lot. And the truth is, there's a step that comes before the grunting, and there's basically, you're going down to the bottom and you want fish to come to you, period. Now, fish, for most people, fish are afraid of you. And they're not afraid of you because they're not attracted to you, because they didn't hear a grunt or a scratch. They're afraid of you because you're doing too much on the bottom. You went down there too fast. You're being too aggressive. Your head is bobbing all over the place. Your fin is up. It's those pieces that need to be fixed way before you start your grunting, because you're trying to do two things. You're trying to not scare the fish first, and then you're trying to attract them into you second. So if you're not doing that first part, second part's not going to work no matter how much you grunt. So to specifically answer that question though, if you are out there and you are at that level where you get down to the bottom, the fish are coming into you nice and casual, the small bait fish are all around you, and now you want to bring in that uku or that mutton snapper or that GT, wherever you are in the world, you want to do some fish attracting methods, which is the grunting and the dusting. The key with that is subtle. It's a subtle activity. It's a small movement, and it's not moving your body around. It's not scaring these fish. The throwing of the sand is it's a dusting. It's a scratching. It's literally, my little hand does this. It is not a grab and a throw up in the air and building this cloud, because yes, that fish might notice you, but it also might be afraid of you. You're doing too much down there. So do that first step, go down to the bottom, do nothing. And depending on what fish we're hunting, that works just fine. Those fish know that you're there. They can sense your energy signals that are coming out. They see all of those fish move away from you. Even if you can't see that uku that's out past your field of visibility, that uku can see the cloud of fish that left when you landed. And what they'll be watching for is, does that cloud of fish come back? And if that cloud of fish comes back and is looking at you like maybe you got some food going on, maybe you're a shark, maybe you're a turtle feeding on the bottom, then that uku comes in. But as far as that grunting, I feel like 99% of people do too much. First step, do less. But when you are doing the grunting, soft, subtle, and that's it. That's all there is to it. It's not that complicated. So from Burr here on that last YouTube video I did, he asked about my GoPro settings. Now, the GoPro is kind of another skill that you've got to learn. And unfortunately, it's a whole nother thing to deal with, especially as a beginner diver, as you're trying to like manage all this different stuff you got going on, and then you're trying to film your dives. The way I do it is I wear the GoPro head strap underneath my hood. So slick the hair back, put the GoPro on, put the hood on, then put the mask on. That kind of holds everything in place. You got to be real careful to kind of go against the seal and pull it when you're getting in the water. Make sure your mask isn't tucked up behind your wetsuit or behind your head strap. But generally, once you get that kind of situated, you're good for the rest of the day. For actual settings, I recommend the newest, nicest GoPro. I really like 60 frames per second. And either right now I'm filming on 4K or 5.3K. That's it. I like to film my 16:9 or whatever the wide thing is, the dimension, so it comes out, the size of the computer. And I like to put it on, what do you call it? I like to have it so that the setting is not super wide, it's just wide. So it's like your generic across the board, regular GoPro settings. I don't put any kind of Pro Tune settings on, anything like that. I do make sure that my beep volume is turned all the way up because that's how I tell whether it is on or off on my head. I also adjust some of the screen settings, so I make it kind of as dim and dull and off as possible because I'm not using the screen's on my head. I don't need it burning extra battery. And then to film stuff, I film every single dive. So when I'm on the surface, it's kind of like part of my breathe up sequence. I'm breathing up. Before I dive, I go click and it goes beep, beep, beep. Turns on. Then I come up from my dive after I'm done dealing with whatever. I go beep, and it goes beep, 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 beep. Turns off. And that's how you kind of tell. And then when I'm on the surface swimming around, if I can't remember whether I turned it off, I'm constantly just pushing it again. And then I can hear it turn on and then I'll turn it right back off again. So I get a lot of these like 2-second clips, but at least I don't get the worst thing ever, which is the 20-minute video that kills your battery. So we got a question here from Andre Gomez from Brazil. He says, I also use Dyneema on my gun, and since I'm from Brazil, we do a lot of hole hunting for dusky groupers. So here it is pretty common for divers to suffer accidents or even die because they got tangled in Dyneema in a hole. What's your advice to avoid these situations? What is the best technique to cut strong lines such as Dyneema? And he says, I'm a fan of your channel, which we're stoked about. But Andre, in all of my career, my 10 years of diving 3 to 5 times a week, not a single time have I been stuck in my line. Never. And it's definitely something that we're all concerned about and we all talk about. And it's all like, don't get tangled up in your line and make sure you have a knife accessible to cut your stuff. But the reality is that it has never happened to me. Of all the dangerous things that have kind of occurred, all the different ways I've almost died spearfishing, me getting tangled up to something on the bottom hasn't occurred. And that is because I am careful of it, for sure. I think the number one thing that he's talking about right now is getting wrapped in something that's wrapped to the bottom. You don't want to be there. And I just saw it on a video the other day I was watching with Sam. We're doing some research, and we watched a very popular YouTuber trying to get an lure out of a hole and went for the multiple grab. And that's exactly what Andre's talking about, where the fish is stuck and you're like trying to get it like this, where you're putting hand over hand over hand. You end up in your hands with a ball of line, which is not what you do. You grab the line and you use your body and you use your fins, which are much more powerful, to swim away. Now you're putting tension on the line. You're only holding it in one place. If something does happen, you let it go. I think the getting tangled is a more avoidance thing than a what to do if it happens thing. If you've tried to cut Dyneema with the whatever rusty, crappy knife you got on your belt, you understand that it's not easy. And certainly not by the time that you've shot a fish, fought the fish, struggled with the fish, gotten tangled up, realized that you're tangled up, then gone to get your knife out of whatever side you have it on with whatever hand is not tangled up, and then try to cut this thing. It's not a good situation. So avoid it, and you're fine. I think that's really the only way to kind of answer that question there is, I don't personally know anybody that has been tangled to the bottom and died. I might happen in Brazil. I understand that it's exactly a dusky grouper situation. They're the big rofos, we call them in Greece. You shoot them and they get stuck in the hole. And you're probably there trying to not let it get stuck in the hole, which is a very similar thing that we do with aluas here in Hawaii, and you do it with other groupers in Florida on the shipwrecks. You shoot them, and the guys are like this, trying to grab the line and pull it to them. When in reality, I never do that. I shoot a fish, I grab the line, and I can cover much more distance by swimming away and get much more force on that fish. Once I'm eventually tight to that fish, I can now use my fins to pull it the direction I want to pull it instead of use my small hand muscles to kind of pull it towards me like that. So hope that helps. Again, avoid it. So our next question here, again, on the YouTube video that we did last. If you haven't watched that one, go watch it. It's pretty cool. The Adam Soriano says, aloha Ryan, love the podcast. You've been information dive. We've been spearfishing in Oahu for a while, and we're looking for resources to track currents and dive safely. Do you have any suggestions? Honestly, the current thing in Hawaii is damn near impossible. I don't understand it. I dive here a lot, many days a week for many years. I still got no clue what's going on out there. I don't think it is tidal. I think what's crazy, out here is that because we have so many different points and nooks and coves, it like hits and it swirls, and sometimes it's going one way and sometimes it's going the other way. And I swear sometimes I will jump in and I will fight the current, and then I'll try to go home and I'll fight the current back, and I'll be like, did this really just switch on me while I was out here spearfishing? So it's definitely tough out here. It's not like it is in Florida where the Gulf Stream goes its one direction. Current's always going that way. Very easy. It happens a lot of the world where I'm used to, it goes one way. Hawaii doesn't seem to do that. Instead, what we like to do is have two plans. So some of my best diving spots are areas where I can jump in and I swim out, and I have a plan whether the current is going left or right. And I have a good exit point. I have a good couple exit strategies. If it is ripping, I know that I can do a 2-mile drift and not have to stress about swimming against that current, because I have like my far exit point, I have my close exit point, and I have my north exit point, and I have my south exit point. So like the best answer there is to kind of get to know your local area as best as you possibly can. You do that by walking when it's rough. You go there, you can't dive, it's already rough and crappy out, walk it. Walk up and down the shoreline, see how you can find those different exit points, and see how you can walk back to your truck. We do so much shore diving here in Hawaii, and my favorite spots are those spots where I know the whole shoreline and I know where I can get out, and that gets me hunting more than swimming. You want to maximize your time where the current is pushing you in a favorable direction at a favorable speed so that you can do what you're there to do, which is hunt. It's not to swim against the current to try and stay over a spot, and it's not to fight against the current to get out to a place to then do a drift back, which some areas, especially out here in Hawaii, we only have one entry and exit point, which is fine, but it means that you're fighting the current at the beginning part of your dive. And the way I like to do that is I swim in the shallows against the current. We might stay a little bit, not as close as we might normally be, dive that 30-foot zone, pick up Moana collies, pick up taco, not really shoot anything too big because we don't want to drag it. Then once we've made it to however far we're going to make it that day, swim out to the deep, drift back to the truck in the 70 to 90, because whatever you do not want to be diving 70 to 90 feet while trying to swim against the current. It just doesn't work. But current diving is another question for another day. So from the Melon Camp, again on YouTube, we've got, how would you recommend a new Spearo to network within the spearfishing community? With me being so new, I'm a bit too shy to reach out to other Spearos because I don't want to be a burden to them. Any tips? Yes, learn to not be a burden. If you're not a burden, it doesn't matter whether you're diving with people that are significantly better or beginners on your same level. And there's definitely some different ways to not be a burden. And I think that's kind of what I'm going to focus on here with this question. I mean, obviously, you guys all know you can network on Facebook, on social media, find your dive buddies like that. But then once you have someone that, you convince to go diving with you, how do you not suck so that they continue to dive with you? Because that's the game here, is as you continue in your spearfishing career, you want to continuously add buddies to like your arsenal of like potential people to go dive with. Because the more people you have and the more your schedule aligns with them, the more often you'll get out there in the water and the more you'll learn. So personally, I've always been a fairly deep diver since I started. I was not, maybe not since all the way I started, but like since, the couple years in, I was one of the deeper divers in the community with my friends and whatever. And the people that got called again and again and again to be my buddy were the guys that didn't hinder my deeper diving, because I want to go out there and I want to dive that 70 to 90. I don't need to dive it all day, but at some point I want to go check it. And the way to do that, because Melon Camp, you're obviously not that 70, 90-foot diver, is to go and take your turn anyways. So when you're doing proper buddy diving protocols, it's basically one diver up, one diver down. You pass the float back and forth to each other and you do your drift. Now, if you cannot make it to the bottom, still take your turn. So every single dive, I do my dive, I lay on the bottom for 2 minutes, I come back up, he passes me the float, I now have the float, he takes his breathe up for a little bit, and then he swims down 30 feet, looks around, hovers, hangs out, maybe a no-no swims up to him, probably nothing. But he still took his turn, and he still practiced, and that gave me my time that I need anyways to breathe up on the surface and get ready for my next dive. He comes back up, I hand him my float, no worries, I continue on, do a couple more dives. Maybe we start in the shallows with him, maybe he gets some good dives while we're working our way out into the deep zone or on our way back or whatever. But reliable dive buddies are hard to come by. So it doesn't necessarily, you don't have to be the deepest guy to be like my preferred dive buddy. You just have to not hinder my own diving. So take your turn is the number one advice that I have for that. Everything else about being just a good human being works really well. Show up, on time to wherever you're going to be. Don't be flaky. We need, the dive buddy is like 50% of your diving. So like if you cancel on me in the morning, like you're not getting called again, period. Because, I got all my gear together, I got all ready, I got it situated to go. We don't cancel on each other. So all the general good human being things kind of work with this. But the number one thing I would say is to go out there, take your turn, be ready to learn, offer to tow that float too. That float towing thing, especially out here in Hawaii, is critical. You need someone to pull the float while I'm down under the bottom. I can't, dropping the anchor line and getting it hooked is a real pain in the butt. I hate doing it. So, somebody there just to take their turn is absolutely huge. So this is a really interesting question we have from Calvin H. He said that he recently saw on Daniel Mann's channel a world champion justifying leaving the snorkel in the whole dive, and the reason was very compelling. I'd like to know your thoughts on the topic. I too watched this video. I'm a big fan of Daniel Mann. He's the OG spearfishing YouTuber guy. I also know that world champion in question, Giacomo de Moya. Arguably, he's not even argument, he's the best in the world. Dude's incredible. I competed against him in both Greece and Portugal, and he won the last one in Italy at his home turf. But what's really interesting about that question is we're also ingrained from the freediving community. The snorkel's got to come out of our mouth. So basically, before you dive, spit the snorkel, do your dive, come back up, breathe on the surface, put snorkel back in your mouth. That's typical. But what is unique about that is we all learned from the freedivers. In some way, we all learned from the freedivers. Whether you took a course, your buddy took a course, something. These guys, the Mediterranean divers, didn't have freedive course. Giacomo de Moya has been diving since before I was born. These guys, a lot of them are commercial spearfishermen or tournament spearfishermen, which means they're not diving with a reliable buddy. They're diving with a reliable boatman. A lot of these guys have professional boat drivers that drive a boat for them. And that's like the part of the partnership. And then they talked a lot about that in the Daniel Mann video of him, that I think it was Klaus was the driver of the boat that put him on the spot every time and watched him, but doesn't have a wetsuit on, isn't suited up. It's really Giacomo de Moya's job to stay alive. So what they do is they keep that snorkel in so that when they're on their way up, 15 feet from the surface, blows out that air as all your air expands, then hits the surface, goes on your belly, lays flat. Now the snorkel is clear, and if you did black out, 99% of blackouts happen in that top 15 feet, which means you're out, in theory, with a clear snorkel that's poked up to the sky. Add that to the fact that most of these divers are doing what we call variable weight diving, which means they are riding a weight down and leaving it, swimming back up, which makes them very buoyant. So that means, theoretically, blacked out on the surface, snorkel out of the sky, floating, very buoyant. If that snorkel was not in their mouth and nobody was around or the boat driver didn't see him, he's going to black out, he's going to suck up water, and he's going to drown. If snorkel is in his mouth, clear to the open, clear to the sky, he's going to suck in air, wake back up, get back on the boat, go have a beer. So that is, I think, the theory behind that method. I don't think it is really relevant to your regular recreational diver. I think we've all been so instilled with the fact that you need a buddy in the water with eyes on you all the time. And that is our safety method. And I do think that there's a little bit of merit to Giacomo de Moya's strategy. I've heard it before, but only from that side of the world. It's a solo, deep diving tactic. I think it's outdated. It's very cool. He's a without a doubt, a world-class, best in the world diver. But for 99% of us, get a good buddy, dive together, spit that snorkel out, because you're not going to be that buoyant. When you come to the surface and you are properly weighted to not do a variable dive, and you do that relaxed exhale as you come up and your bubbles come out, a lot of you guys are going to sink anyways, which means the snorkel out of your mouth doesn't matter. Snorkel in your mouth doesn't matter. When you go to breathe, you're sucking up water. I think that's kind of, it's just kind of outdated. I don't think it's relevant. Dive with a good buddy, watch each other, and that's it. And you'll shoot more fish, I guarantee it. The buddy diving is the key to getting better at spearfishing, shooting deeper fish, shooting better fish. You can't do it by yourself, and you certainly can't learn to do it by yourself. So we got another question here from Daniel Arachiga, and he's asking about flashers. The flasher system is mostly used for blue water. And what it is, essentially, if you guys don't know, it's a series of like flashy lure type mirror devices that call in fish from afar. And what we like to say is the flasher brings them in and the chum keeps them there. So you might, most of the time, this is done in conjunction with each other. So you have a flasher float with your flasher going off of it. You got a little chum bag there, sardines, whatever, anchovies, depending on where you are in the world. And you make these little chunks and they go down. As far as where to get one, I think the best ones are made. There's a couple companies now that are kind of making them out of their garage. Buzz Bomb flashers, I think, is one. They're really cool. They come with like a tinsely flasher squid looking thing on the bottom, and then like some mirrors on the top. A lot of the off the shelf ones I don't really like. I think they're kind of small, like the Rob Allen one you see everywhere. The big metal twisties and the cable and all this stuff. What makes a really good flasher is it being easy to deploy and not tangle, because a lot of times if you're not doing a shore dive for blue water, which a lot of times we aren't unless you live here in Hawaii, you are getting on and off the boat with it. So if you're diving a buoy or a fad or whatever, you're getting off and you drift in, so that flasher's got to be wound up every single time. So getting something that doesn't tangle is key. So I had a lot of questions about my knot. It's certainly not my knot, but the knot that I use to connect my shooting line, which is Dyneema, to my reel line, which is Dyneema. And I'm gonna show you guys that right now. I actually have my spear gun I was using as a prop. This here is my everyday gun. This is what I'm using now. You can see Dyneema here on the reel and Dyneema here on the shaft. This is actually the same Dyneema, but I do cut it and tie it together right here. We do that so that if I do have to cut it, I cut it below the reel line, which means I don't eat away at my length of reel line, and I can have another spool that I continuously make shooting line for the spear gun, because it is fairly common to cut it. So we've got our knot right here. For those of you listening on podcast, you're obviously not gonna get this. You can go watch it on YouTube. This is my everyday guy right there. You can see it's got a simple overhandy knot here that I use. This connects the shooting line. This is the reel. There's a knot right there at the end of my tag end. That is so that I can go like this in the water. Picture I got gloves on, I go, boom, it's untied. Pull it, boom, it's untied. Quick release. I have used that knot on absolutely everything. I've shot tuna, yellowfin tuna, I've shot dogtooth tuna, I've shot everything. It gets stuck to the bottom. I've cleated this thing to the boat to try and rip my shaft out of the reef. The knot will not break. Something will break, but the knot won't break. So, this is what it looks like separated. I'm in the water with gloves. It's all big, very easy. I go through, like that. Then I go around, and I try to wind it back towards the direction of the loop. I go around a couple times, 3-4 times. Then I push it back through with the bend. So I push the bend back through, and I don't go all the way. And it ends like that. I go like that. Boom. That's my knot. I can do it in the water, with gloves, no big deal, easy. Won't come out. I need to pull it out. Goes like that. I'm gonna show it to you one more time and try to get off of my eyeballs, and maybe it will show it better. Okay, so I got it right here. It's gonna go through like that. Comes about to there. Gets wrapped back towards the little guy. Gets bent. And comes through like that. This one came out a little smaller. Doesn't matter. Won't pull through. And if I need to, boom, it's untied. Well, guys, that's all the questions that I got today. If you guys like this format, please let me know down in the comments. I just downloaded a cool software so that hopefully I can start interviewing people from all over the world. We're gonna have the podcast episode is gonna drop on Friday every single week, and on Monday every single week, you guys are gonna get a vlog of me out there spearfishing, catching, cooking, adventure life. Thank you so much for all the support, and we'll see you next time right here on Ryan Meyer's Expeditions.